On a winter night at Union Railway Station, a lone woman in scrubs sat on a bench, arms wrapped around herself, breath turning to ice in the air. Her name was Elena Morales. She had been on her feet for 20 hours, an extra shift on the intensive care unit because nurses had called in sick, because there had been a pileup on the expressway and more patients were pouring in with frostbite and hypothermia. She hadn't eaten in 12 hours, hadn't slept in 36. Her dark hair was tucked into a bun under a knit cap she had purchased in the hospital gift shop. Her coat was thin. It had been her mother's, a faded navy wool that had seen better decades. Beneath it, scrubs clung to her skin damp from melted snow. She shivered violently and pressed her hands between her knees, listening to her teeth click together. She could have called a taxi, but she had given the last of her cash tips to a teenager at the hospital whose insurance wouldn't cover their prescription. She could have called a friend, but she had used her phone battery streaming cartoons to keep a child distracted while her mother got stitches. The weight of her life pressed heavy on her shoulders, a mountain of student loans, a younger brother waiting at home with a stack of unpaid bills, and a heart scarred from a fiancé who had run off with her savings 3 years ago. It would have been simple, she thought, to cut corners like some of her colleagues did. She could have refused to take extra shifts, could have looked the other way when an uninsured patient needed more time. Yet compassion had been carved into her by her father, a mechanic who had died under a mountain of medical debt. She had promised herself she would never become numb, that she would not let the endless suffering in the ICU turn her into a machine. And that promise meant she sat there now, breath fogging the frigid air, waiting for a train that might never come. The doors at the far end of the station blew open. A gust of wind roared through the hall, flinging snow like shattered glass. It carried with it a man and a phalanx of men in dark coats behind him. For a second, the space seemed to shift, as though a shadow had crossed the entire station. Heads turned. Conversations stilled. Even the announcements seemed to quiet. The figure at the center of the gust walked with the kind of confidence that bent space around him. Tall, broad-shouldered, he wore a tailored charcoal overcoat that flared at the hem. Collar turned up against the wind. A black suit beneath hinted at his wealth, but it was the way he moved, fluid, controlled, as though danger followed him like a loyal dog, that commanded attention. His eyes scanned the hall, assessing exits, threats, and possibilities in one sweep. Luca Moretti had been called many things: Don, boss, king of the underground. On the pages of newspapers, the term ruthless followed his name like a title. People whispered stories about how he had clawed his way to the top of Chicago's underworld, and how he had built an empire by exploiting every weakness of his opponents. The law knew him as a ghost they could never catch. His enemies knew him as the last face they saw. He had known hunger as a boy in Little Italy. He had known fear as a teenager running numbers for men who would have slit his throat for a mistake. He had carved his own path with nothing but his fists and his brain, and he had succeeded through a willingness to do what others wouldn't. Yet beneath the polished stone of his exterior, there was isolation, a loneliness born from a life where everyone wanted something from him. The people he trusted could be counted on one hand, and all but one of them were dead. Luca didn't usually take trains. He had a fleet of armored vehicles and drivers. But a deal in New York required discretion, and he had decided on a route that would allow him to travel unnoticed. The storm had complicated matters. A rival crew had chosen the same night to attempt an ambush. He had neutralized the threat quickly, leaving him with a bleeding gash across his ribs beneath the layers of cashmere. He ignored it. Pain was an old companion. He strode toward the private waiting room reserved for wealthy passengers. His men flanked him, scanning the halls with trained eyes. And then he saw her. In a sea of empty benches and scattered commuters, she was a beacon of suffering and stubborn dignity. Her lips were blue, her hands trembled, but her eyes stared ahead with quiet determination. Something in him stilled. For a heartbeat, the roar of the wind and the echo of his men's footsteps faded. He saw the way her fingers clutched her thin coat, and the way she blinked slowly like someone fighting exhaustion. Her cheekbones were high and strong, her skin a warm brown against the pallor of the snow. Her expression held a weary kindness, as if she had been holding others up for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be held. For reasons he could not understand, his chest tightened. Luca stopped. It startled the men behind him. Men who had followed him through shootouts and backroom negotiations halted mid-stride. His lieutenant, Dominic, glanced at him in surprise. "Boss," he murmured. Luca's eyes were fixed on Elena. He took a step toward her bench, boots clicking on the marble floor. He didn't know her name, but he knew he couldn't walk past her. He had built his empire on transactions, on giving to get. What he felt now wasn't a transaction. It was something akin to compulsion. Elena felt the disturbance before she saw him. The air shifted, like static before a lightning strike. She looked up and found herself pinned by the gaze of a man she had never seen before. His eyes were dark, almost black, set under thick brows. There was power in those eyes, an intelligence that missed nothing. She had seen similar eyes in surgeons who commanded operating rooms, but those men did not radiate danger. This man did. Instinct told her to look away, to shrink into her coat. Pride, and maybe fatigue, kept her spine straight. "You look like you're waiting for hypothermia," he said, voice smooth and low, an accent she couldn't place. It wasn't the playful banter of a stranger at a bar. It was an observation layered with command. "I'm a nurse," she replied through chattering teeth. "I would know. I'm not there yet." Her voice didn't shake. She was freezing, but she would not let a stranger, especially one who looked like he could buy the station, think she was weak. His lips curved slightly, a hint of amusement that softened his harsh features. "Nurse," he repeated. "Then you know what comes next. Your train?" "Delayed, or cancelled. They've been saying they'll update us for an hour." She rubbed her arms. Her phone screen lit up with an 8% battery warning. No one had texted her. There was no one to text. Luca shrugged out of his overcoat in one fluid movement. The gust of cold air that hit his body brought a spike of pain from his hidden injury, but he didn't flinch. He draped the heavy wool coat over her shoulders without giving her time to protest. It enveloped her, swallowing her in warmth and the scent of him. Clean, expensive, hints of cedar and smoke. She stiffened. "I can't take this," Elena said, hands lifting to push the coat back. He placed his hand gently over hers, the pressure firm but not forceful. "You can, and you will," he said quietly. "I'm not standing here arguing while you freeze to death in front of me." His fingers were warm, his touch careful. There was nothing leering in his gaze, no selfishness. It was commanding, yes, but also concerned. The combination disarmed her. "I don't even know you," she said. "You don't owe me anything." He considered her words. People owed him everything, or so they believed, but he had always believed in debts and payments. He didn't know what she owed him, but he knew what he wanted to give. "Maybe I'm not doing this because I owe you," he said. "Maybe I'm doing it because I can." She frowned, but she didn't remove the coat. Warmth spread across her shoulders, seeping down her arms. It smelled like safety. She hated that something from a stranger could feel like safety. "Do you do this often?" she asked, eyes narrowing. "Find women in train stations and give them your clothes?" Luca's smile didn't reach his eyes. "No," he said truthfully. "I don't find many people who look at me like you're looking at me right now." "How am I looking at you? Like you're not impressed?" A small laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. It turned into a cough. She pressed a fist to her mouth. When she stopped coughing, he was still watching her, but there was softness in his gaze that made her stomach flutter uncomfortably. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "There's a lounge for private passengers. It's warm and there is coffee. You're shivering." "I can't afford—" He cut her off with a slight tilt of his head. That wasn't a question. Behind him, Dominic's eyes widened. Luca rarely repeated himself. He never cajoled. People either obeyed or they suffered. The fact that he was persuading a stranger was disorienting for all present. The men with him exchanged glances but stayed silent. Elena weighed the options. Pride told her to refuse. Experience told her that men who insisted often demanded something in return. But there was something about his presence, controlled, patient, almost respectful, that made her believe he wasn't trying to trap her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way he had placed the coat on her shoulders with surprising care. Maybe it was the fact that her fingers were numb. Finally, she nodded, slowly. "Just for a minute," she said, "until my train comes." "Just until then," he agreed, as if it would be longer. He gestured to Dominic, who opened a side door. Warm air rushed out, smelling of rich leather and coffee. Luca extended his arm slightly, guiding her without touching her. She stood, swaying from fatigue. He placed a hand at the small of her back, light as a breath, steadying her. She tried not to lean into it. The lounge was dimly lit and quiet, with leather chairs, a fireplace, and attendants who looked as if they had been transported from another era. A barista glanced up and nearly spilled a cup when he saw Luca. Recognition flared in his eyes, followed swiftly by fear. He bowed his head and busied himself behind the counter. Luca ignored him. Elena felt the tension in the room shift. Attendants straightened, eyes averted. It was clear that the man beside her commanded a kind of deference that had nothing to do with wealth alone. People feared him. Luca guided her to a sofa near the fireplace. She sank into the cushions, sighing as the heat seeped into her bones. He removed his suit jacket and draped it over a chair, revealing a crisp white shirt underneath, the fabric straining slightly over his chest. As he leaned forward to pour coffee from a silver carafe, she noticed a small bloom of red at his side, marring the pristine white. Her nurse's instincts flared. "You're bleeding," she blurted before she could think. He froze. His gaze snapped to hers, surprise flickering across his features. She pointed to his shirt. "Right there. Did you—" She trailed off. She didn't know how to ask if he had been shot. Luca's jaw tightened. Dominic stepped forward. "Boss, I'll get—" Luca held up a hand. "It's nothing," he said. "A scratch." Elena's eyes narrowed. "That is not a scratch. And don't tell me you don't feel it. Sit down. Let me see." She stood, the fatigue momentarily forgotten. The commands of the last 20 hours kicked in. She had been raised to believe there was no such thing as an unimportant wound. People bled out from scratches. She had lost her father because he had believed he didn't need to see a doctor. She would not let this stranger bleed because of arrogance. Luca stared at her for a beat. No one ordered him. The last person who had tried had not lived long. Yet something in her tone, professional, impatient, genuine, made him comply. He sat, unbuttoning his shirt with practiced movements. She pulled off her knit cap and knelt beside him, rummaging through her bag for the small first aid kit she always carried. Her hands, though cold, were steady as she cut away a piece of his undershirt to reveal the wound. It was a clean slice, likely from a knife. Blood oozed slowly, thick and dark. "You need stitches," she said, cleaning the wound with antiseptic wipes. The scent of alcohol stung the air. "This is deep." He watched her hands move, the competence of them, the way her forehead creased in concentration. "It can wait," he murmured. "I had other things to attend to." Apparently, those things involved ignoring yourself. She looked up and met his gaze. "Why didn't you go to the hospital?" He smiled without humor. "Hospitals are complicated for men like me." She didn't press. She wasn't stupid. She had a feeling she knew what he was implying. "I don't have sutures," she said, "but I can close it with butterfly strips until you get somewhere safe." He nodded. The heat of the fire warmed his skin. The pain was dull, a throb he could ignore, but the sensation of her fingers, gentle and competent, was something he was not used to. Most who touched him did so out of fear or desire. She touched him because she refused to let him bleed. It disarmed him more than any rival ever had. Dominic cleared his throat. Boss, the train... We'll wait, Luca said. His eyes were still on Elena. What's your name, nurse? Elena, she said without looking up. Her hands pressed the final strip into place. She wiped her fingers on a cloth and looked him in the eyes. And you? There was a beat of silence. Dominic shifted, as though waiting for an explosion. Luca had many names. The one he used here could get him arrested. But looking into her steady gaze, he felt a pull to be honest. Luca, he said. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? No. Curiosity. Luca what? She asked, then shook her head. Never mind. You don't have to tell me. He laughed softly, a sound that made his men glance at each other. Moretti, he said. Luca Moretti. She froze. The name hit her with the weight of all the whispers she had heard in the hospital when police brought in gunshot victims with no names. Nurses gossiping in the break room about the man who controlled half the city. News articles glimpsed over other people's shoulders. The king of Chicago. Ruthless. Untouchable. She inhaled slowly. That she was currently holding his blood on her hands sent a jolt through her veins. You're exactly who you think, he said, watching her carefully. He expected fear, maybe revulsion. He had seen it before. He did not expect what he saw. Her eyes widened, but not with terror. They filled with something like sadness. You're the one they talk about, she said quietly. The one who makes people disappear. She stared at the wound she had just closed. And yet you let me take care of you. He shrugged. You're the one who insisted. She sat back, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave now that the adrenaline faded. I should go, she said. My train is canceled, Dominic interjected softly. He held up a phone. All trains have been suspended until morning. The storm is worsening. Roads are dangerous. The temperature is dropping to -40 wind chill. Elena's heart sank. She thought of her brother waiting with a microwave dinner. She thought of the old space heater they used sparingly because the electric bill was overdue. She thought of the landlord who would not wait for rent. I can't sleep here, she said. I have to get home. You can't get home, Luca said. The city is shutting down. My driver barely got me here. You'd freeze on the street. She lifted her chin. So what do you suggest? That I come with you? He held her gaze. Yes. No. She stood, shrugging off his coat. He grabbed it and draped it back over her shoulders. We don't even know each other. You're a criminal. The word hung between them. His men stiffened. Luca didn't flinch. That's one way to describe me, he said. But I'm also the man who is not going to let you die in a train station because you gave away your money for someone else's medicine. Her eyes widened. How did you... He tapped his temple. I pay attention, and I saw you hand cash to a boy in the hospital earlier. You didn't think anyone noticed? I did. Heat flooded her cheeks. You were at the hospital? Briefly. Enough to see you run yourself ragged for people who can't pay you back. Enough to see the way you looked when you saw the little boy's eyes as he cried. He leaned forward slightly. You're not the only one who watches. Silence stretched. Outside, wind rattled the windows. The storm screamed over the river, hurling ice and snow. Elena's body ached with fatigue and cold. Her mind whirled with warnings, and yet, something in his words, some recognition of her sacrifice, drew her like gravity. Where would we go? She asked quietly. Somewhere safe, he said. Warm. You'll sleep. I'll make sure you get home in the morning. And if I say no? I'll sit here with you all night, he said simply. I don't think you can afford to lose more hours of sleep. She exhaled. Pride warred with practicality. She had spent years building boundaries to survive in a world that took advantage of kindness. But she had also spent years learning to trust her instincts. Her instincts whispered that this dangerous man would not harm her. They whispered that he kept his violence for others. They whispered that he might surprise her. She closed her eyes for a second. Fine, she said, but I'm leaving at dawn. Luca nodded, something like relief crossing his face. He turned to Dominic. Have the car brought to the south entrance. He looked back at Elena. Stay close. They exited through a side door, bracing against the wind. Luca held his coat collar high, his free arm around her shoulders. Snow slapped their faces, stung their eyes. The car waiting on the street was a black SUV, engine running, heat blasting. Elena slid in, sighing as the warmth wrapped around her. Luca followed, seating himself beside her, his men in the front. Chicago's streets were nearly deserted. Traffic lights swung on their cables. In the glow of sodium vapor lamps, the snow looked like ash. Luca's driver navigated slowly. Elena stared out the window at the city she had known her whole life, transformed into a post-apocalyptic landscape. The car crossed the river, turned down side streets, and eventually pulled into an alley behind a building she had never noticed before. From the outside, it looked like a warehouse. Inside, it was a fortress. Luca led her through a private elevator that opened into a penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panorama of the city. Firelight flickered along a wall, illuminating sleek furniture and shelves filled with books. It didn't feel like the home of a criminal. It felt like the home of someone who had curated beauty as a shield against ugliness. He motioned for her to sit on a sofa near the fireplace. An older woman appeared silently from a doorway, her gray hair braided down her back. She wore a simple dress and an apron. Her eyes warmed when she saw Elena. "Nonna," Luca said, his voice gentle. "This is Elena. She'll be staying the night." Nonna's eyes flicked to Luca's bandaged side and she clicked her tongue. "Again?" she muttered in Italian. She turned to Elena and switched to English. "You look frozen. Come. Or I'll get you soup." Elena smiled gratefully. She didn't have the energy to process the fact that the mafia boss lived with his grandmother. As she sipped hot soup a few minutes later, warmth spreading through her, she listened to the older woman chastise Luca in rapid Italian. Luca responded with patience and affection. It was a side of him she hadn't expected. He was still watchful, still carrying an aura of command. But here, in this space, he was also a grandson who listened to an elder. The contradiction intrigued her. After dinner, Nonna showed Elena to a guest bedroom. The bed was enormous, the sheets crisp and warm. Elena stood by the window for a minute, watching snow slash sideways across the city, drifts forming in alleys. She thought of the patients in the hospital, of the little boy with pneumonia, of her brother huddled under blankets. Guilt knifed through her. She should be with him. She pulled out her phone. 1 bar. She texted him. "I'm safe. Stay warm. I'll be home in the morning." She didn't mention where she was. There would be time for that. Sleep pulled at her eyelids. She crawled into the bed fully clothed, Luca's coat still around her shoulders. For the first time in days, she slept deeply. Luca stood on his balcony, the wind cutting through his shirt, the bandage at his side tight. He watched the storm carve the city, the lights blurred by snow. He had always loved storms. They were cleansing in their violence. Tonight, he felt something like gratitude for the weather that had forced him into Union Station, that had led him to a woman with a spine as strong as steel, and eyes that did not flinch when they met his. He thought of the way her hands had moved over his wound. He thought of the frown between her brows when she told him not to minimize his injury. He thought of the sadness in her eyes when she realized who he was. He had never been affected by a stranger. Lust, yes. Curiosity occasionally. But this was something else. He felt protective of her in a way that unsettled him. He didn't know her story, but he knew pain when he saw it. And he recognized something else. An integrity that he had thought extinguished in the world he inhabited. He inhaled sharply, the cold searing his lungs. He had built walls high around his heart. He had sworn never to let anyone close, not after his first love had been murdered by a rival to punish him. But the nurse's face hovered before his eyes, and the walls felt cracked. His phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. It was a message from a contact at the hospital. The head of the hospital administration, Dr. Price, had been embezzling funds meant for patient care and pocketing insurance payouts. Nurses who complained were dismissed. Patients without insurance were turned away. Luca's jaw clenched. He had heard rumors. He hadn't cared. Hospitals were not his territory. They were legitimate institutions, and messing with them brought too much heat. But Elena worked there. If Price's corruption hurt her, he would intervene. He texted his contact back one sentence: "Get me everything." Elena woke to sunlight filtering through curtains. She sat up, momentarily disoriented. Memories crashed into place. The station, the cold, the man with dark eyes, the warmth of the penthouse. She slid out of bed, stretching. Her body ached pleasantly from sleep. On a chair by the bed were folded clothes, a soft sweater, leggings, wool socks. A note in neat handwriting rested on top. "Figured you might need these. L." She smiled despite herself. She showered quickly, grateful for hot water, then dressed in the provided clothes. She felt like herself, and not like a freezing ghost in hospital scrubs. In the kitchen, Nonna bustled over a stove, humming. Luca sat at a long table, a cup of espresso in his hand, his hair damp from a shower. He wore a charcoal sweater, the bandage visible beneath it. He looked up when she entered, and something like relief softened his features. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. She poured herself coffee and accepted a plate of eggs from Nonna. They ate in companionable silence until Luca spoke. "The trains are still delayed, but my driver can take you home now," he said. "The plows have cleared enough of the main streets." She nodded. "Thank you for last night." She hesitated. "And for the clothes." "Keep them," he said. "They look better on you than on any hanger." She rolled her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips. "You don't have to try to flatter me." "I wasn't trying," he said simply. Their gazes held. Something warm fluttered in her chest. She looked away, focusing on her eggs. After breakfast, Luca walked her to the elevator. They stood in the quiet space, the hum of machinery the only sound. "If you ever need anything," he said, "call this number." He handed her a card. It had a phone number and nothing else. No name. She hesitated. "Why?" she asked. "Why me?" He met her eyes. "Because you made me feel like more than what the world thinks I am." He swallowed. "And because I owe you for the stitches." She laughed softly. "You don't owe me for that. Just try not to get stabbed so often." His lips twitched. "I'll try." The elevator dinged. The doors opened. Cold air kissed her face. Dominic stood by the SUV, door open. Elena turned back to Luca. "Goodbye," she said. "Au revoir," he said. "It means, until we see each other again." She shook her head. "Don't hold your breath." But there was no malice in her voice. She slid into the SUV. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the building. Luca stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. A strange ache lodged in her chest. She shook her head. She had no room in her life for dangerous men with dark eyes. She had a brother to care for and bills to pay. She tucked the card into her bag and told herself she would never use it. Days passed. The storm lifted. Life resumed its relentless pace. Elena returned to the ICU, charting vitals, comforting families, wrestling with broken equipment. She slipped back into her routines. But little things had changed. A week after the blizzard, new monitors appeared in the ICU. The supply closet, always bare, was fully stocked. Nurses whispered that the head administrator had been suspended pending an investigation. A board of trustees meeting had exposed financial irregularities. Dr. Price had resigned, citing health reasons. There were rumors that a powerful benefactor had demanded his removal. Elena suspected she knew who that benefactor was. On Wednesday, she returned home to find her brother Marco sitting at the kitchen table with a laptop and a scholarship application. He looked up, eyes wide. "Did you hear?" he said. "The city council just announced a new community clinic funded by some private donor. It's going to be in our neighborhood, free services for anyone without insurance." her heart squeezed. "That's wonderful," she said softly. "They said it was spearheaded by Luca Moretti," he added, scrolling through the article. "Isn't that the gangster?" She froze. "Why are you reading about him?" "He's trending on every news site," Marco said. "He's donating millions. People are calling it the Redemption Fund. Some are saying he's trying to clean his image. Others think he's making a move for political influence." He looked at her. "Do you think it's real?" Elena thought of Luca standing barefoot on his balcony, the city raging around him, softness in his eyes when he looked at her. She thought of the supply closet at work, suddenly full. She thought of the community clinic that would save lives like her father's. She thought of the card burning a hole in her bag. "I think people can surprise you," she said. That night, she pulled out the card. She stared at the number. She didn't call. She didn't need to. But she went to bed thinking of a man she had met on a stormy night and the way he had covered her with his coat. It had been 2 months when she saw him again. She was walking out of the hospital after a double shift, her backpack slung over one shoulder, the winter light already fading. The wind was sharp but bearable. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. Her heart stuttered. The window rolled down. Luca's face appeared. He looked tired, a shadow of stubble on his jaw, eyes rimmed with red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Her nurse's instinct flared, but it was his voice that unraveled her. "I didn't know where else to go." She hesitated, scanning the street. No one was paying attention. She approached the car. "What's wrong?" she asked, peering into the dim interior. Then she saw the blood on his shirt, stark against white, a deeper wound than the one she had treated. Panic flared. "Get out," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Now." He did as she ordered. He staggered slightly, one hand pressed to his side. She slid his arm over her shoulders, feeling the weight of him, and guided him toward her car, an ancient sedan parked under a flickering streetlight. She didn't have time to think about the fact that she was putting a mafia boss into her rusty Honda. She didn't have time to think about the men in black cars who watched from a distance. All she knew was that he was bleeding, and he had come to her. She drove to her apartment, her mind racing. Her brother was out, thankfully. She half-carried Luca up the stairs. He winced, but he didn't protest. In her small kitchen, she laid him on the table and cut away his shirt. The wound was jagged, messy. A bullet grazed, maybe. He was pale, his eyes fluttered. He had lost more blood than he admitted. "What happened?" she demanded, pressing gauze to the bleeding. "A message," he muttered. "From a man who doesn't appreciate my charity." "Stupid," she hissed. "You decide to play hero and people get mad. Imagine that." She grabbed her suture kit from her bag. She had purchased it with her own money because the hospital's supply was always short. Her hands moved quickly, cleaning, anesthetizing, stitching. She forgot who he was. He was just a body, a patient. She fell into the rhythm that had saved so many lives. "Keep talking," she commanded. "Stay awake." He smiled weakly. "You always order me around." "Someone has to," she snapped. She tied off a suture. "If you die on my kitchen table, I'll kill you." "Impossible," he whispered. "I'm too stubborn." She stitched his skin with precision. He watched her, marveling at her focus, at the sweat on her brow, at the way she bit her lip when the stitches pulled. "Why did you come here?" she asked finally, not looking up. He considered. "Because I trust you." She laughed, a sound without humor. "You don't trust anyone." "Exactly," he said. "And yet here I am." She tied the final knot and wiped his skin clean. He sat up slowly, wincing. She handed him a glass of water. He drank, eyes never leaving her face. "Thank you," he said softly. She shrugged, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the situation. She was standing in her tiny kitchen with a man who had donations in the millions, and blood on his hands. Her heart thudded. "You should go," she said. "People will look for you." "I know," he said. He stood, swaying slightly. May I see you again? She stared at him. Why? He searched her face as if he were searching for an answer inside himself. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm not drowning, he said. And because I need to believe that I can be more than what I've been. Her breath caught. She wanted to laugh at the cliché. She wanted to yell at him for thinking he could wash away years of violence with a few donations. She wanted to tell him that she didn't have time for men who needed saving. But she saw the raw vulnerability in his eyes. The same vulnerability she saw in patients who feared dying alone. She remembered the weight of his coat on her shoulders. She remembered the community clinic announcement. She remembered the supply closet full of equipment. He was trying. I'll think about it, she said quietly. He nodded, accepting her non-answer as if it were a gift. He turned toward the door, then he paused. Elena, he said, her name soft on his tongue. If you choose to stay away, I will understand. I won't pull you into my world. But if you ever walk into it of your own accord, I won't let you go. She swallowed hard. Threat or promise? Both, he said. And then he was gone. Weeks passed. News of Luca's philanthropic efforts filled the papers. The redemption fund expanded. Families received restitution for loved ones, lost to gang violence. Scholarships appeared in neighborhoods ravaged by poverty. Politicians grumbled, accusing him of buying goodwill. Others cheered. Rival crews plotted to exploit his attention being elsewhere. An attempt was made on his life. He survived. Elena watched from the periphery, reading articles during her lunch breaks, listening to nurses argue about whether a mafia boss could truly change. She avoided his calls. She texted back once. I'm busy. I'm working. He responded only, I know. No pressure. Stay safe. She told herself she was doing the right thing. She didn't need him. She had her job, her brother, her patients. Yet his presence hovered like a ghost. She dreamed of his hands on hers as she stitched his wound. She replayed the way he had looked at her in the elevator, as though she had become the axis of his universe. She told herself it was dangerous. She told herself he was dangerous. She told herself she wouldn't go back. Then, one Friday evening, the hospital's power flickered. The backup generators groaned. Nurses glanced at each other nervously. Not again, someone muttered. The hospital administration had failed to upgrade the electrical system for years. The generator sputtered and died. The ICU monitors went dark. Ventilators powered down. Panic erupted. Elena's heart pounded. Bag him manually, she shouted at a nurse, pressing a resuscitation bag to a patient's face. Voices shouted down the hall. Doctors cursed. Families cried. In the chaos, Elena's phone buzzed. She ignored it. She pumped the bag, counting the seconds. Sweat dripped down her neck. A minute later, the lights blazed back to life. Machines beeped. Ventilators whirred. Power surged. Elena sagged against the bed, relief flooding her. She glanced at her phone. A text from an unknown number. I heard the hospital lost power. Check your generator. L. Her chest tightened. She looked up. Out the window, across the street, a black car idled. In the driver's seat, Dominic nodded at her and drove away. She exhaled, a laugh bubbling up and choking into a sob. She pressed a hand to her mouth. He had eyes everywhere, and he had saved lives tonight. That night she went home, showered, put on her warmest coat, and stood outside her apartment building with the card in her hand. The sky was clear, stars shimmering over the city for the first time in weeks. She dialed the number. Elena. Luca's voice answered on the first ring. He sounded like he had been waiting by the phone. I can't keep pretending you're not changing things, she said, words rushing out like a dam breaking. Everywhere I look, I see your influence. People are safer. Patients are getting care. My brother's scholarship was funded. The clinic opens next month. The generator turned back on because of you. I don't know if this is redemption or strategy. I don't know if you're trying to buy forgiveness or if you're genuinely transforming. But I can't deny that you are making the world better. She paused, swallowing. And I can't deny that I want to be part of that. There was silence on the line, taut and vibrating. She heard him exhale slowly. "Where are you?" he asked. "In front of my building," she said. "Stay there," he said. The call disconnected. A minute later, headlights turned the corner. A familiar black SUV pulled up. Luca stepped out. He walked toward her, the distance closing in a few strides. For a moment, they stared at each other, years of pain and hope and fear passing between them. Then she stepped forward. He closed the gap, his arms wrapped around her, warm and strong. She pressed her face against his chest, inhaling cedar and smoke and the faint scent of gunpowder. The world narrowed to his heartbeat. Snow began to fall again, gentle flakes landing on their hair. "Are you sure?" he murmured into her hair. She nodded, her cheek against his coat. "I'm sure." "I won't let you go," he said. "I know," she whispered. He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "My world is dark," he said. "It doesn't deserve you." "Maybe it does," she said softly. "Maybe if I'm there, it will get lighter." He smiled, a genuine, almost boyish smile. "You've always been stubborn, and you've always been bossy," she retorted. They laughed softly, the sound carried away by the wind. He took her hand. It dwarfed hers, but it fit. He led her to the car. As she climbed in, she felt the weight of the decision settle into her bones. She was choosing to step into a world she had only glimpsed. She was choosing danger and a man with blood on his hands. But she was also choosing love, in all its messiness and redemption. She was choosing to believe that people could change. She was choosing to believe that she could change them. Their love story was not easy. There were nights when Luca returned home with bruises and exhaustion, eyes haunted by decisions he had to make. There were days when Elena questioned whether she had made a terrible mistake. They fought over his methods, over her stubborn independence. He insisted on sending security with her. She refused. She insisted he cut ties with his most violent associates. He argued that he couldn't dismantle an empire overnight. They argued, then they compromised, each bending, never breaking. Elena's presence changed Luca's organization. He established strict codes of conduct. No trafficking, no drugs in neighborhoods with children, donations to community programs, scholarships. Men who disobeyed faced swift consequences. He shifted his operations toward legitimate businesses, construction, restaurants, security firms. It hurt his income in the short term, but he didn't care. He was tired of blood. With Elena at his side, he felt a responsibility he had never felt before. He wanted to build something that wouldn't crumble the moment he died. Elena continued nursing. She refused to live off his money. She volunteered at the community clinic, advocating for preventive care, using Luca's donations to buy equipment. She used her voice to speak at city council meetings, telling stories of families who had been torn apart by violence and neglect. Her face appeared on local news. Her calm, clear voice resonated with people who had been ignored. She didn't mention Luca by name, but everyone knew. Reporters dubbed her the Angel of the South Side. Luca attended her speeches, always in the back, in shadows. He had never been one for public attention. Now he watched as the woman he loved spoke truth to power. He listened as she called for better funding for hospitals, for accountability from administrators, for compassion from wealthy donors. He saw the way people looked at her, with admiration, with hope. It made his chest swell with pride. He had never been proud of anything but his ability to survive. Now he was proud of being associated with her. The city buzzed with rumors. Newspapers ran headlines about the unlikely partnership. Commentators debated whether a mafia boss could truly become a force for good. Some called for his arrest, citing his past crimes. Others argued that his transformation was proof that redemption was possible. Hashtags trended: Moretti Redemption, Angel and Devil, on Love Changed Chicago. People wrote think pieces about the power of love to alter history. Old Italian men in coffee shops whispered that they had never seen anything like it. Young girls in neighborhoods once ruled by gangs posted videos of themselves outside the new clinic, thanking Luca and Elena. Priests preached sermons about forgiveness. Politicians scrambled to align themselves with the wave of support. Luca's enemies plotted. A rival, Salvatore Sal Romano, furious that Luca's pivot toward legitimacy was costing him profits, orchestrated an assassination attempt. It happened on a crisp spring afternoon. Elena was leaving the community clinic, her hair loose around her shoulders, a file folder in her hand. Sal's men lurked around the corner. They raised their guns. Luca, who had insisted on watching from across the street, saw the movement. Time slowed. He shouted her name. She turned, eyes widening. He lunged, throwing himself between her and the gunman. Bullets flew. People screamed. Glass shattered. Luca felt pain bloom in his shoulder. He fell, dragging Elena down with him, shielding her body with his. He heard the thud of feet, the roar of engines. His men fired back. Sirens wailed. Then the world narrowed to Elena's face above him, her hands pressing on his wound, her tears falling onto his cheek. "No," she whispered, voice fierce. "Don't you dare leave me." He tried to smile. "Bossy," he rasped. "Shut up," she said, fingers shaking as she tied off his makeshift bandage. "You're going to the hospital." He hated hospitals, but he went. He survived. Sal was arrested within hours. Testimonies flowed in, as if people had been waiting for a reason to topple him. In the hospital, Luca lay in a bed, tubes in his arms, Elena's hand in his. Reporters gathered outside the building. Nonna prayed the rosary by his side. Chicago held its breath. The mafia boss who had been untouchable was now a victim of violence while protecting a nurse. The irony was lost on no one. When Luca was released, arm in a sling, he and Elena stood on the steps of the clinic. Cameras flashed. Microphones thrust forward. He cleared his throat. The words that came were not the words he had prepared. "I have done things I am not proud of," he said, voice steady. "I have taken lives. I have hurt families. I cannot change the past, but I can change the future. This city has been my home. I owe it more than blood and fear. I owe it safety, opportunity, and care. I owe it my life if necessary." He looked at Elena, his eyes softening. "I was saved by a woman whose compassion knows no bounds. She made me believe that I could be more. She made me believe that this city could be more. So I am pledging today, publicly, to dismantle the organization I built. I will work with law enforcement to transition my businesses into fully legitimate enterprises. I will cooperate in investigations into organized crime. I will fund hospitals, schools, and clinics. I will, to the best of my ability, make amends." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. The police commissioner, who had been informed in advance, nodded. An FBI agent looked as though he might faint. Luca continued. "This is not for praise. This is because I love a woman who refuses to let me hide behind excuses. And because I love this city." Elena squeezed his hand. She felt tears slip down her cheeks. The man who had once terrified Chicago was now promising to dismantle the underworld from within. It was unprecedented. It was dangerous. It was historic. The next months were a whirlwind. Luca sat with prosecutors in confidential meetings. He handed over names, locations, ledgers. He moved money out of secret accounts and into public foundations. He faced threats from men he had once commanded. He kept his word. Elena stood by him, testifying to his character, advocating for restorative justice, fending off accusations that she had been manipulated. Their love story blazed across headlines. Historians speculated that this moment would be taught in classes about criminal justice reform. The Redemption Act, a bill inspired by Luca's cooperation, passed the state legislature, creating pathways for nonviolent offenders to re-enter society through community service and education, funded by seized criminal assets. 1 year to the day after the blizzard, Elena and Luca stood on the stage of the newly opened Morales Community Clinic, named for her father. The mayor cut the ribbon. Nonna cried in the front row. Elena spoke first, telling the story of a nurse on a freezing night who met a man she had been taught to fear. She told of the compassion that had passed between them. She told of the conversations that had led to systemic change. Luca spoke after her, his voice cracking when he thanked her for not turning away. They clasped hands, raising them to cheers. Cameras captured the moment. A viral hashtag trended worldwide. Love made history. Later, in the quiet of their home, away from cameras and speeches, Elena curled against Luca on the sofa. The city lights twinkled below. Snow drifted softly outside. She traced the scar on his side, the first wound she had tended. He kissed her temple. "We did it," he murmured. She smiled. "No," she said. "We're just getting started." In years to come, teachers told their students the story of the ruthless mafia boss and the freezing nurse. They told how a winter storm had brought together two souls who might otherwise have never met. They told how compassion had cracked open a hardened heart. They told how love had transformed not just two people, but an entire city. They told how the pair had faced hatred and danger, and had chosen to fight for redemption. They told how their love had indeed made history.